can make the difference between you blowing up a motor and blowing tens of thousands of dollars on a motor.
It's both.
Yeah.
It's that fancy stuff, but then it's that thing nobody thinks about cranking. Nobody thinks about idle because it's all about the horsepower, what's my turbo size, all that thing. It's those things which are so not sexy and nobody would be thinking about them. But if the clearly, by far, the single strongest argument I'm getting about, oh my God, this is an amazing standalone, it is literally about idle. People tell me I would never expect idle to be that good. I keep returning to that strange thing, but that's where the difference comes.
From Olympic City and the home of Pikes Peak, this is the Automotive ADHD Show with Matt West.
So I have a really exciting edition of the show for you today, a little bit different than the normal format. I'm going to have a guest join me in the next segment, and we're going to go for the whole show talking about standalone ECUs. This is really cool. Now, half of you got really excited if you're listening. The other half of the listening world, their eyes sort of glazed over and they went, yeah, okay. And I'm here to tell you this is really interesting, okay? Even if you are not into crazy project cars, this has a very cool application. Now, my guest coming up, he is the founder and CEO of rusEFI, RUSEFI. Now, rusEFI makes aftermarket fuel injection control systems. That's basically the gist of it. They actually do a lot more than that. But that is the gist of what we're going to talk about. And the reason this is cool is because, yeah, there's other EFI, ECU manufacturers, we'll say ECU, engine control unit. I'm going to get a couple of definitions out of the way. Of course, my folks listening on the podcast, they click on the podcast because they're into cars. So if you're on the podcast, chances are you're actually familiar with a lot of what I'm going to tell you. But for the benefit of my radio audience, because you can just stumble across this on the radio dial all across southern Colorado, I want to give you a little bit of some background as to why this is relevant and cool and why we should support this. Not only that, dare I say, I will get on a little bit of a high horse and talk about why some legislation needs to change that makes this easier to do because it's better for everybody. But of course, before we get to that, I do want to thank you for joining me on the show and remind you that you can catch this program not just on the radio across southern Colorado. We're on my flagship station, AM 1460 The Answer. We're also on 100.7 The Word and 91.7 KLZR. If you're catching it there, fantastic. Keep the dial right there. But you can also find the show on video, YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, and more. And do me a favor, because we are trying to grow the YouTube channel. If everyone listening on the radio who catches this show on the radio subscribe to YouTube, I could maybe quit my day job. But right now, the YouTube channel needs your help. And you can do that by going over to YouTube and searching Automotive ADHD. Look it up. Comes right up when you search it. And go ahead and subscribe to it. Even if you listen here on the radio every weekend, I do some stuff that's YouTube only as well. I do certain bonus shows. I also do videos from here in the garage studio, the shop. I've got another trip coming up this January to Japan, and I'm going to be doing a ton of stuff on YouTube that I just can't show you on the radio. You got to go to the YouTube and check it out. So again, look it up on YouTube and subscribe to it there. Now, when it comes to standalone ECUs, you have a number of options, and I should clarify what I mean by standalone ECU. Okay, so in a production street car, modern street car, and I say modern, anything really from the 1980s on up, which has electronic fuel injection. So modern in this case isn't really modern anymore. However, any sort of vehicle that has electronic fuel injection, and we're not going to get into mechanical fuel injection and other stuff. That's old school, very cool, not what we're talking about. But having said that, the fuel injection system in your car is controlled by a computer. That computer looks at a number of engine parameters. It sees how much air is going into the engines, and it sees how much you are pushing the throttle pedal to know how much, acceleration do you want. So it looks at your throttle position. It looks at the airflow into the engine. A lot of times you may have had a car that had a failed MAF sensor or a MAP sensor. Those do very similar things, and basically what they do is tell the computer how much air is going in. And why that's important is because you need a specific ratio of air to fuel to get the correct burn of that fuel. You need to have that fuel burn completely, efficiently, make the most power without risking damage to the engine. You need the correct ratio of air and fuel. That's why the computer needs to know these things. Then when the computer knows how much throttle you're commanding, how much air is going into the engine, it then tells the fuel injectors how much fuel to put into the cylinders. And I'm sort of dumbing this down, and you can get really crazy and into the weeds with direct injection. There's all sorts of stuff. But at its core, that's what happens. The computer also needs to know what position the engine's in. You've got a crankshaft that rotates. The pistons go up and down. They rotate the crankshaft through that up and down motion. It needs to know what position that crankshaft is in so that it knows what position each of the pistons are in so that it can then not just command the fuel, but command the spark. It then fires the spark plug, thus initiating the combustion event, pushing that piston back down, rotating the crank, and you do that several thousand times a minute, and you have forward motion. So the computer needs to know all these things. It also needs to know stuff like the cam position, because the camshaft controls the valves which let that air in and out of the combustion chamber. So it needs to know a number of variables. It does that with different sensors. Now, the problem comes when you have a track car, and I do have to be very clear here. I have to say track car. Can you technically buy any of these products and put it on a street car? You probably could, but I'm not allowed to tell you that because that could cause that legally the government has not been a fan of you doing that. And they don't like folks doing that. They haven't liked folks doing that. It's a little bit better now with Lee Zeldin's EPA, but you still have to be careful. And that's kind of what I'll get to here in a minute because I think that needs to change. But I have to say that it goes on a track car or an off-road vehicle. And look, at the end of the day, I'm not your mother. Whatever you do, if you get yourself in trouble with the EPA, that's on you, not on me or the guys who make these ECUs. Again, I have to be very clear about that. Also, we don't want to get the guys who make these ECUs in trouble by doing dumb stuff that we're not supposed to do, because guess what? The government's going to go after not just you, it's going to go after the guy who made the ECU, and he might have said, this is track use only. I didn't tell that guy he could put it on a street car. They'll still come after him, okay? So we need to resolve that. That's a big thing because these standalone ECUs, in my opinion, should not just be limited to track use because they allow you to do so many different things that you might want to do with a car that's operated in places other than the racetrack. So, and this ties into a right to repair argument. This ties into a lot of different things. But with all of that, you can get these various products, and the products range in various qualities, prices, and capabilities. Not every one of these aftermarket ECUs. These replace the factory ECU. The factory ECU is always locked down. You can't modify it. You can't change it. So if you've got a track car, you put a turbo on that car that it didn't come with a turbo. Well, you can't just run that turbo on the factory engine because that turbo is going to increase the amount of air volume that goes into the combustion chamber. And when it does that, the readings that the computer's looking at will be totally wrong compared to what a factory ECU wants, right? So that's what these aftermarket ECUs do. They fill in a gap where you've got a track car and you've modified it to a point where it will no longer run and run safely on the factory hardware. And these products range from many thousands of dollars to, well, what we're seeing now in the past few years, some that are in the few $100 category. And I can tell you my next guest has a product that does the stuff the $1,000 ones, the multi-$1,000 ones do. Drive-by-wire, CAN bus control, does all of this stuff that these do for a lot less than that, like $175. It sounds too good to be true. I promise you, it is not too good to be true. It's a real thing. But before we get to that, though, I do think this is something that legislation should look at as car enthusiasts, but car owners. You can use a product like this to, and that's not the context we'll talk about it here in this interview, but you can use this to resurrect an old car. The old computer hardware's failed. I did that on my 86, my AE86, 40-year-old car. We put a standalone ECU on it because the old electronics failed and you couldn't get new ones. Stuff like this helps you keep things on the road, and I'll probably discuss that more on the show at a later date. But coming up after the break, we're talking rusEFI and why you need it for your track car.
No left lane hogs here. Automotive ADHD with Matt West.
I have a special guest joining me here on the program, and it's not just me on the program here. We've got someone I'm really excited we were able to get him. He's really a busy guy, and he's been very kind in taking some time to join me here on the program. He is the founder of something I am a fan of, which is rusEFI. We are going to talk about standalone ECUs and perhaps, I think, one of the best, if not the best, standalone ECU option on the market. Andre, welcome to Automotive ADHD. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
So, okay, you are the founder of rusEFI. And before we discuss rusEFI and why it's really, truly one of the coolest EFI options, and I was telling you before the show that I have it on one of my vehicles, my K24 swapped S2000 track car, and I'm a big fan of it. It does a lot of amazing things, and it does those amazing things at a really compelling price point. And of course, you have not just the option I've got in my car. You have tons of different ECUs for pretty much every sort of application out there. But before we get into how cool this is, because I think it's very exciting, tell me a little bit about your background and what led you to create rusEFI.
A long story. I loved cars from a very safe distance when I was a kid. My uncle was into cars. I was dreaming to do ridiculous stuff while have no idea and no background and no connection whatsoever with all this. I was curious, but nothing. I moved to the States 15, 16 years ago. And while I was slightly bored in the office, I was really lucky that people were looking for the fourth guy for 24 Hours of Lemons. I'm sure you've heard of 24 Hours of Lemons.
Oh, that is a
That
cool
is a
event.
very cool thing. Yes. Without 24 Hours, rusEFI wouldn't have happened. They needed the fourth body. I was a body enough. In the next couple of years, Keith, I hope Keith will hear this. Keith have taught me a lot of things. This is the first time I changed the wheel. This is the first time I changed the brakes. This is the first time I changed the transmission. This is the first time I participated in an engine swap. We had a Mercury Tracer GT, which is a very distant relative of Mazda Miata. So through the BP engine. This is a front-wheel drive thing with a 1.3, but the BP would bolt on. So through the engine, the whole thing turbocharging came up. I had no idea what this is. I absolutely had no idea. I was trying to figure out what this all means. What does it mean turbocharging? What does it mean standalone? I was having no clue whatsoever. I was trying to go through the documentation for the stuff available, and it was just not making sense. It was ridiculously obscure. It was some dark voodoo magic. It made no sense whatsoever. I realized that the only way, I guess I realized that there's no reason for that to be so confusing. Like, it felt like there should be a cleaner way for all that to be presented and else, with way less dark magic. And that's when I kind of started making my own thing, apparently as the way to understand what's going on. I got myself a relatively related vehicle. I started doing ridiculous stuff with it, coming from a software background. I think I should have mentioned that. I'm a Not supposed to say that I'm a very qualified software developer. I'm a software developer. That's why I was in the office. I have no idea what electronics means. I've killed a ton of hardware while in the first couple of years until the next guy who started helping reappeared.
Well, and your background in software engineering led to this curiosity, but also this drive to improve on the options that are out there. So, for the uninitiated, a standalone ECU is something that you use to obviously control various things about a modern engine. I mean, everyone is familiar with fuel injection at this point. I don't know when the last carbureted car rolled off the assembly line, but it was a long time ago. And fuel injection and electronically controlled fuel injection is the way of the future. It has been the way of the now for a very long time. And your standalone ECUs, are a aftermarket device that can control electronic fuel injection at its very core. But one of the reasons that yours are so cool is because they do a lot more than just electronic fuel injection. And this is stuff that would be really relevant if you've got a crazy track car, a project car, something like that, maybe some sort of off-road buggy, some sort of vehicle like that, like a rock buggy. There's a lot of applications where you want a product that does exactly what you do. So Andre, you went from 24 Hours of Lemons to then creating a ECU company that does these standalone ECUs. And obviously, I mean, we probably don't have time to cover the whole history here on the program. But how did you kind of fill in the gaps between doing, say, the software and then moving that as well into the hardware? Because you're not just providing software, you're providing legitimate, very well-designed hardware.
I was lucky along the way that a bunch of extremely capable people were joining along the way. So I mentioned already that I have a little cemetery of those discovery boards. Mm-hmm. Those are the prototyping boards I started with. Jared came in and he saved the discovery boards and he saved myself. Between me and Jared, the first reasonable rusEFI thing, which, as you're rightfully saying, is a collaboration between hardware and software, has happened. And then that story repeated a lot of times since then, where somebody would come in and they would contribute a game-changing improvement to the overall thing. So short answer is I'm a software developer. I'm still just a software developer. I witnessed that miracle of hardware being created from a safe distance. They forced me to learn what an oscilloscope is. I was refusing for 3-4 years. I can now use an oscilloscope as an extremely capable multimeter, but that is the edge of my electrical understanding.
Well, you're very humble with that, though, because with your software developing expertise, with the people that you've brought on board, you've made a product that is so compelling. It is so cool. I mean, people in this space know about, a lot of people maybe.
I've started. You keep saying I made it. I have to be humble because, as I said, at any point of time, it was appealing enough that amazing people were joining and helping. And that's, at this point, it's over a dozen of people. Without him, this wouldn't be what it is. And people come and go, they reappear, they hibernate, they reappear. But at the end of the day, that's how it goes. That's a true open source, which is a separate, huge discussion by itself.
Well, and we might briefly touch on that discussion shortly. And it's very, very good of you and very humble to acknowledge the input of all these other people to a project like this, because it's such a big project that you're right. This is not something you can tackle by yourself and do to this high of a level. Obviously, there's so much expertise and talent that has contributed to that. Now, my guest is Andre B. He is the founder of rusEFI. And Andre, we're going to take a break here in just a second. But one of the things I want to get to after the break is a little bit of what makes your electronic fuel injection, ECU products what makes them unique, what makes them really compelling, especially for guys doing anything with a grassroots project car, a track car, something like that. We're going to get to all of that. So hang tight through the break with me. Again, I'm talking to Andre B., founder of rusEFI. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here on Automotive ADHD.
The other major components are explained by Rochester Products General Manager Wallace E. Wilson. This is the air meter, whose job is to admit air to the intake manifold when the throttle is open. At the same time, it signals the fuel meter so that fuel can be supplied to combine with the air in the proper ratio. And this is the newly designed manifold with its 8 nozzles, one for each cylinder.
So you are listening to the Automotive ADHD show. I'm your host, Matt West. My guest joining me, Andre B. He is a founder of a very cool electronic fuel injection ECU product that I am so excited about because I actually own one of these products and I really like it. Now, Andre, so that video clip right there was from 1958. That is General Motors' take on fuel injection in 1958. And I think we've come quite a way. What do you think?
We did, but it's still getting more and more complex, more and more efficient.
It absolutely is. And what I find fascinating about it is it's been an evolutionary sort of take on this because many of the principles that they were dealing with in 1958 are still absolutely relevant because the fundamental process of internal combustion isn't all that different from 1958, but we have certainly added a lot of efficiency. We've added a lot of cool features as well. We've got things like drive-by-wire now. We've got, all sorts of stuff, launch control, flex fuel. I mean, we've got a whole lot of cool things. And you have, with rusEFI, you have really catered to some of these cool things that really we don't see in aftermarket ECU products like your, think of your Haltech ECU. People might be familiar with that. Your AEM, stuff like these big name brands, Link ECU, right? There's all these different big name brands that cost thousands and thousands of dollars. And they don't even offer some of the features you're offering on some of your really affordable products. You've got a great range between the ultra affordable EFI, the Micro Rus, you've got the Proteus. Walk me through some of the really cool features that you do in a price point that's basically anywhere between $175 and $600. We've got a little bit of a range in your product range there.
I'll talk about the features before we talk why we have the features, because really this is all about the fact that when this all started, maybe there was a miraculous phase in amateur electronics when Discovery stuff appeared, STM32 microcontrollers. They were extremely ahead of the competition, which at that point was still the same Arduino.
Mm-hmm.
Being a computer guy, I'm a software developer, and a software developer. At that point, that was obvious that Arduino stays where it is and it's not the thing of the future, while STM32 as the platform was obviously the future. It took us 8 years to outgrow the original STM32F4. Boring detail, we're now touching the next one, and we still have potential to keep growing. So pretty much the status quo, 12 years ago, was for $20, you could get an unbelievable amount of computing power doing your things, as long as you stay within a more complicated than Arduino platform. STM32 is now trying to be Arduino friendly, but I am forgive me for saying this, I'm a proper developer. I didn't need Arduino training wheels. I was doing proper software from the beginning, barely understanding what an engine is. But the software was done the way corporate software is being done. Until this day, we are the only product in this category doing software the way software people are doing software. It's very obvious that a problem for many devices like this is when it's very obvious to me as a software guy, I see that the hardware people have developed an amazing piece of hardware, and then they force themselves to become software developers enough, and they are engineers, so they can software develop enough for that to be a software developed enough. But primarily they are electrical engineers, and that software stays in a miserable state of not being done the way software is done, the way the real, forgive me, software is done.
Mm-hmm.
I am coming from corporate software development, so we have boring practices of corporate proper software development with like continuous integration, unit tests, coverage, reports, issue tracking, history. It's whatever. It's one thing to blink an LED. It's a very different thing to have software where you know that it's pretty reliable without sniffing any gasoline, without touching any engine oil whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. And real quick, would you say that that's one of the really big things that separates you from?
This is the biggest. This is the thing. This is the biggest. The foundation.
And what does that mean then for, okay, you have this superior software engineering foundation with a core focus on that. What does that mean for the guy who wants to put this in his track car? Say he's got a Miata time attack car. What does that
means that his idle. That means that his idle control is going to be unbelievably good for a standalone ECU. That means that he will have software-based knock processing, which is a very tricky thing to tune and troubleshoot. But this is the rocket ship of standalones. To be honest, I'm not aware of what are other products which, first of all, have built-in knock detection, but then ours currently shows you the spectrogram of what are the noises in the engine. And it is the rocket science of, for example, specifically the knock input. And then we can afford to have relatively rocket science of idle control. We can have relatively rocket science of cranking. Realistically, engines are extremely tolerant. You can force an engine to run within a very wide range of parameters. This is why carburetors are good enough. They are still good enough. They're simple. They do it. This is why you can create a ridiculous electronic fuel injection with that 555 timer. That's that's not a microkernel. That's a magic chip timer thing, and there's everything built on 555 chip. An engine would run based on a 555, which is not a microcontroller. An engine would run on anything. While an engine would run on anything, the engine wouldn't enjoy it. You would step on the pedal, you would see that the engine is not enjoying that you stepped on the pedal. Your engine would warm up, your idle would walk away. You would notice that the engine is surviving, but it's not happy. You will see it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and with, and that's the thing that I really love about this is you can bring this expertise, this software engineering expertise, and it translates to a real world thing that you can feel the difference with, that you can see the difference with. Because a lot of guys who are going to put a ECU in, they may not have some of this intricate knowledge, but they're going to know that, wow, my car runs really good. It's really efficient. You mentioned that knock protection. That's especially relevant, again, if you've got a project car, you're boosted, you're running this thing on the ragged edge of performance, and that knock protection is something that can make the difference between you blowing up a motor and blowing tens of thousands of dollars on a motor.
It's both.
Yeah.
It's that fancy stuff, but then it's that thing nobody thinks about cranking. Nobody thinks about idle because it's all about the horsepower, what's my turbo size, all that thing. But then you need to crank it. Sometimes the weather changes, you still need to crank it. You need to warm it up. You need to warm it up reasonably quickly. You need to idle it when you are in the pit lane or whatever. It's those things which are so not sexy and nobody would be thinking about them. But if the clearly, by far, the single strongest argument I'm getting about, oh my God, this is an amazing standalone, it is literally about idle. People tell me, I would never expect idle to be that good.
Wow.
I keep returning to that strange thing,
Well,
but that's
and
where
hold
the difference comes.
Hold that thought right there. Hang tight for just a second. We're going to take a break. I'm talking to Andre B., founder of rusEFI. This is so cool. We're going to get more into this after the break. Don't go anywhere. Hey, Matt West here, coming to you live from the Denver International Airport, or at least the back rooms. I think I'm lost in here. If you're looking on video, I don't think this is where my terminal is. But having said that, I want to tell you about SpyTech GPS, sponsor of the program. And you know, SpyTech, I've talked about how they are a tremendous way for you to help protect yourself against car theft. And I like them especially when I'm traveling. I'm here in the airport on my way to Japan. I can park my car here at the airport with peace of mind. And you know, a tremendous number of cars were stolen from the Denver International Airport and get stolen every year that way. And, you know, there's always this little bit of worry when you park at the airport. Is something going to happen to my car? Well, with SpyTech GPS, you can keep an eye on it, make sure things are where they should be. And if you use my promo code AutoADHD15, get yourself 15% off anything in the SpyTech store and an additional 35% off when you get an annual subscription. That's AutoADHD15, spytech.com, SPYTEC.com. Check it out. Now, I will see you on the other side here, assuming I can find my way to my terminal. You ever been to the airport here? This is a crazy airport. So I'll see you in Japan after this.
His motor skills are just fine. Automotive ADHD with Matt West.
All right, so we're continuing our discussion here. Andre B. is my guest, founder of rusEFI. I've been saying it several times on the show. If you've got a really cool project car, track car, whatever it is, right, and you need a ECU that does some really cool stuff, okay? Because you look at what goes into running a car, and yes, we've been making cars run for years on carburetors. The OEMs out there have been making cars run on, electronic fuel injection for years. But there's a really big portion of the market that's not served really, and that is that, if you have a car that you've turned into a track car and you're doing track car things with it, you're doing a turbo on it, you're doing all sorts of different stuff, you're trying to control various systems on a car that's maybe been entirely gutted. You can't really do that with the stock ECU, and you wouldn't want to anyway on, for example, a track specific application. And there's a lot of applications. I'm just kind of narrowing down on track stuff because that's what I know, at least. That's what's close to home for me. But the options for you to do this are somewhat limited, and those options can be really expensive. And why I'm so excited about what rusEFI does is it really bridges that gap, that gives you that solution to control your engine, but also other systems on a track car. But it does it without costing you thousands and thousands of dollars like some of the competitors do. And so Andre B. is my guest. Andre, welcome back to the show. Thanks for hanging tight through the break.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Now, Andre, so one thing I want to get to, we were talking about why the software before the break, the software engineering that you do has a true nuts and bolts effect for a guy who's running his car, right? Like it actually makes a tangible difference. I want to shift now towards the fact that your products are open source. And tell me, why is open source really cool for rusEFI in particular? And what does that mean? Again, why is that a benefit to the guy who's running that in his car right now?
It is the benefit because in the end of the day, it makes it so affordable. And let me explain what it means. When I was starting, I can't really explain why it started as an open source, but it was a very lucky decision. Being open source means that I get contributions which I would never be able to either make myself, because that is a complex engineering system, or I would never be able to pay anyone else to do those. So pretty much I'm getting amazing stuff for free. That's the game of open source. People, those handful of contributors who did amazing stuff, maybe a couple hands at this point, they are in the position where they can see the proper foundation, which means that the people of the highest caliber are accepting to contribute and to improve. It is a complicated code base. It is a complicated code base means not anyone can contribute. Unfortunately, we ended up being very picky about contributions. They have to be up to the standards. But that gets us the good side of the coin as well. If that's a contribution from somebody who is extremely knowledgeable in either software or the engines, or usually both. And those are really expensive contributions. There was a guy with a Wikipedia article about him. We have people who are highly successful software developers and their day jobs where they're having fun. And realistically, the way I put it is now, realistically, that's an average profile of our contributor. Those are highly skilled, highly paid software developers in their normal day job who are having fun because they like cars enough to contribute. There's very few of them, but what they do, it's unmatched.
So really, it's a contribution of people who have a passion for this, people who are skilled, but being open source, that means that you are not just you're not just a company who's hiring software engineers. You are reaching out to the community. You're vetting some of the contributions for being quality, but you're taking contributions from people who have a passion for this and they want to see it succeed. And like you said, that helps amazingly with cost, because instead of being a big brand name ECU company, who has, 50 software developers all on salaries, 6-figure salaries, well, that cost gets baked into your final product. That's why some of those products are
your product cost. And I don't have this. I mean, the most expensive piece of a standalone ECU is the potential payroll for the software developers. Those are not cheap. And I don't have that expense. So that's how I can do what I can do for $175 for my hobby project. It is still something I'm having fun with. I have a day job. This is not my day job. This is a vanity/hobby thing, but I'm having tons of fun with it.
Well, and I think that it's a very cool project that, it being open source, gives you these opportunities, that gives you the ability to do this at the scale that you're doing it at. But to the consumer, to the guy who wants to know if this works on my Time Attack Miata with a turbo, he gets the benefit.
They shouldn't be bothered about the open source. They just get an amazing screaming deal. They just get a screaming deal with the caveat that engineers are excited about engineering, less excited about documentation. We have less than amazing documentation. This is our weakness. But many people have figured it out. The knowledge is growing day by day. There's content explaining realistically, the last year we spent only trying to improve usability and documentation. We know that that's the weakness, but going back to the original message, it's an unbelievable ratio of what you pay and what you get. We're just apparently blowing up the market out of the door.
And that is what I want to get to, is that unbelievable ratio of value that you get. Because let's call out your competitor in the room that is the closest to UA-EFI, which is ultra affordable EFI. That's your $175 ECU. And that closest competitor is Speedduino. Now, I have personal experience with Speedduino. I had a U4AC Speedduino in my AE86 at one point. And it was a really cool standalone for what it did. It was really cool, but it had a number of limitations. And the UA-EFI is something that cuts into that price point, that entry-level price point that a lot of guys, maybe in the Miata world or, who know Speedduino for, it cuts into that, but it adds so much more capability. Walk me through some of that capability that it adds and why someone should be interested in that.
It is drive-by-wire, it is the built-in wideband, and it's the knock detection. And let me elaborate on those. Drive-by-wire effectively allows you to play with stuff from the 2000s and newer. Without the drive-by-wire, you stay in the 90s, Realistically, that's kind of the threshold between cable-driven throttle body and electronic throttle body. Electronic throttle body by itself is just a little detail. What it enables, though, is very interesting. Electronic throttle body goes into, it touches on traction control, it touches on torque management. Without that, you won't be able to run a modern transmission. We are flirting with the modern transmission integration. So by itself, it doesn't give you direct value, but there is so much cool stuff built on top of that throttle body that it's kind of becoming a necessity. The wideband controller is a little accessory which everyone needs if they're playing the standalone game. We have it built in. It costs us, I don't know, $5, $7 to have it on the board. That saves you $50, $60, $70 because you're not buying a separate device for $50, $60, $70. You have it on the same board. It's integrated. You're not wiring. It's right there. You're comparing a standalone without the wideband controller with a standalone, with a built-in standalone wideband controller. And then the knock thing is just the next grade of standalone of understanding how happy is your engine. Knock control, again, you can either do it externally if you're running out of microcontroller power. We're not running out of power. We have a very hefty STM32. It allows us to do very proper knock detection right on board. It costs us 0 cents in additional, it costs 20 cents in additional parts, as opposed to, again, you would either have an external knock controller device. Many people would just run blind. And with us, you don't run blind. You know your knock situation. It's not something you touch in the next 3 months of your standalone journey. But eventually, that's something you're supposed to be touching. It's just the steps. You can start with the carburetor and whatever. You probably are in a good spot with a Speeduino for a very basic, very old engine. It's a great learning platform, but you will outgrow it very quickly. And then rusEFI will keep giving you way, way, way more stuff on top.
Well, and the room for expandability is tremendous. And like you mentioned, the various features that things like drive-by-wire really give you. I mean, if you understand why that is so cool, you understand also why it's so cool that you suddenly have that ability in an ECU that's $175. I mean, that just, when I've mentioned to people that the ECU in my S2000 does drive-by-wire, they assume they immediately put it in a league of ECUs that are thousands of dollars, because people have this notion that in order to get these things, the knock control, drive-by-wire, you also mentioned the integrated wideband controller, which I think is really a great option to have too. People associate these.
And I'm really curious, now that you say this, I'm really curious, what is the cheapest product combining all this on the same board? I'm sure you can get this for $1,000, but I'm curious if there is anything much cheaper than that to give you those three things within that device, not as an external add-on later on.
I don't think there's anything under that $1,000 threshold. Someone can correct me on it, but if there is something in that price range, I haven't found it, and I've looked. So that's why that's really cool. Now, again, we've only got a minute left. Andre B is my guest. He's the founder of rusEFI. And we could continue. We can get really technical on this. And perhaps, Andre, we'll have you back on the show to talk about some of your other products that are coming up that are really cool, like the transmission control, which we don't have time to get to it now, but that's really neat. Now, give me a quick heads up. How can people find rusEFI? If they're listening to this and they say, man, that is what I need.
Google rusEFI.
Just Google it.
That's very simple. Google rusEFI. I'm trying to have a reasonably clear website. rusEFI is the keyword, and very quickly you'll see the ultra affordable as the featured product.
I love it. That's rusEFI, RUSEFI. Look it up. Andre, thanks for joining me right here on Automotive ADHD. I really appreciate your time. This was a great interview, and I look forward to having you back. And thank you for joining me on this edition of the Automotive ADHD Show. If you missed any portion of the show, Well, shame on you, but it's okay because the YouTube does exist. Yeah, this show is on video, and actually not just YouTube, Spotify, and Facebook, but we are getting close to 10,000 subscribers on the YouTube page. So even if you listen on the radio, give it a listen on YouTube, and remember to subscribe to it there. Help us get up to 10,000 subscribers. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Catch you right here next week.